So the painting I'm working on here is a second large painting based on the Alhambra Palace in Granada. About 2 years ago, I completed this painting, which is the Hall of the Two Sisters with a vista through into the garden. The person that bought this painting decided it was perfect for a particular space he'd got, but he wanted a companion piece, which gave me the opportunity of proposing this, which is the courtyard of the Myrtles. And this is the painting I'm working on now. This is one of the photographs I'm using, but I've also got other individual photographs of separate sections. So even this is a collage of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 photographs. And then the color mixing that generates this palette of colors often will come from individual photographs, not necessarily even taken on this trip or from this part of the building. The painting is about 2¼ meters by 2¼ meters. The drawing has taken just over a year. Once the drawing is completed, I then set about making stencils. And the reason I make stencils is everything I do is either sprayed on through the stencil, or I nowadays increasingly use a sponge to create a texture. But first we need a stencil. Right, so this is my plotter that would normally cut my stencils, and they cut the stencils, the machine cuts the stencils from vinyl, a hole is cut, and one sprays paint through that. And on this laptop, I will have the files that go to make up either an individual stencil or this drawing, and today I'm working on one of the sections from the painting upstairs. So this drawing was started about 24 hours ago, and as you can see, we haven't done very much. In 4 days' time, it may complete the whole piece of paper. So it'll be 3 arches and some of the detail of the windows at the back of the painting. And the cutter is going to be drawing 24 hours a day. If this was drawn by hand and on a drawing board, it would probably take several weeks, if not months, of constant drawing. Over here on this wall, we've got some of the individual sections, so that if we take a printout for one area, and this area at the moment is here, and this has already been painted, that area is made up out of 20 stencils. Each stencil has an individual colour, and here are some of the colours that we used for that area. So what I've got to do now is make sure that there is going to be no overspray from spraying these areas going onto the painting that's already complete, and that I hope won't need any more work on it, and no touching up. I'm almost at the point when I'm going to start painting. This is going to be my guide, an indicator of what I'm actually going to be working on. Here is the first stencil, and with this first stencil I established the registration marks, which become the guide for the next 10 stencils. Right, I'm just choosing the first colour that's going to go down, and I'm trying to get the feeling of the quality of colour within this area. As you can see at the bottom, it's in the light, at the top, it's in the shade, and I'm going to try and choose from a palette of maybe 500 colours the most appropriate. So I think that this is going to become my palest colour. I will then blend it through as we see it lined up there. For me, each painting is a challenge. If I'm repeating something I've done before, I think I'd be very bored with it, but every painting is new, and with each painting, I try and go a little bit further than I have with the previous painting. So I'm putting in more and more detail, and have done in the last 4 paintings than I'd ever previously done. I've also been working on other paintings where it's much more about texture, and quite a few large areas have been put down and then I sand back into them. So I may paint for several days in one area and arrive at a fairly flat surface, and then I will take sandpaper or even acids or solvents and etch back into earlier surfaces. So all the time I'm trying to keep myself interested in what I'm doing, but all the time I'm trying to take each painting a little bit further than the last painting. Here you can see that the stencil's starting to lift. So I'm having to press it down, and probably I'll have to hold it down as I'm spraying. So I've established the base colour. These triangles are on masking tape, not on the painting, so that these become the registration marks for the following stencils. What I have to first do is just make sure that's dry. The further on I get with the painting, it becomes more and more necessary to keep things covered up, especially when I'm working with detail at this level, because here I spray because I get a much finer mark going down. As we go forward and the detail becomes larger in the painting, Then I'll be using a sponge and a brush. With a sponge and a brush, there's less likelihood of paint going over other parts of the painting. With a spray gun, yes, it's fairly accurate, it's very small, it goes down through the stencil, but there's always the danger of overspray, and that means that fine bits of paint are landing all over the surface. Now what I've got to do is make sure that it's not only in the right place generally, but I've got to make sure that it's utterly precise, because we're going over an existing stencil and I can't have any edges showing. And on it, in a case like this, it almost makes sense to just increase the size of the stencil a fraction so that there's no danger of the original showing through. And I can see already that there is a slight problem here, which might mean that later on I'll have to repaint this doorway that goes in to make up for the inaccuracy. The inaccuracy is not to do with the way it's being cut, but the fact that this blue material will change. Now, this was painted maybe 3 months ago when it was much drier, warmer. When it's more humid in the studio or colder, the film can contract or expand and you get fluctuations, and it's just to do with the nature of the material. What I'm doing here is just taking the wax off the top of the masking tape. Then this goes under the registration marks so that the paint will stick to it. I could carry on making paintings from the Alhambra probably for the rest of my life because it is so special. I've spent a lot of time now photographing the building, maybe 2-3 weeks, just sitting carefully, looking, waiting for the light to shift. But when I get back to the studio, the photograph is only the starting point. The next and probably most important stage is to deconstruct the photograph and reconstruct it through drawing. And behind every mark within the building is an underlying geometry. So every single curve, every single pattern is based on a very rigorous mathematic, geometric system. The drawing for a painting like this is approximately 9 months. Then there'll be another 6 months of turning those drawings into coloured areas. And then there's probably 3 months of stencil making and preparing the stencils, the weeding of the stencils. There's maybe 2 months of colour mixing, and then maybe 9 to 12 months of me painting. But obviously, I'm not doing it on my own. I'm working with a team, and they're a team who've all got very different individual skills, and we're collaborating to make one painting that's more important than me as an artist and more important as an individual. It is the byproduct, once again, of collaboration. I'm probably now, after about a year, at the final stages of the painting, and I suppose this is what I'd call the fine-tuning stage, that basically the composition is all there, the notes are all in the right place, but some of the elements need tuning in so that relationships between objects, the tonal relationships, the shadows, position the painting. I've decided that these two columns, which are so important in the composition of the whole painting, are a little too crude and that I've got to repaint them. So to repaint them, I'm starting again with the 12 stencils that will make up the column. And once the first piece is on, which gives the overall shape, I then will be sponging or spraying onto the surface. What I first do though, before I spray, is to use a medium which will dry clear, and I brush it so that if there's any bleeding under this piece of film, any edges that are allowing liquid to go through, they'd allow paint to go through. So I put an invisible, what will become an invisible medium on, brush it, then I've got to roll it down. I'll just go and get a roller. Right, so I've brushed on the medium. I now have to roll it down, so if any has gone seeped under the blue film, it's pushing it out. If it has gone under the film, at least it will dry as a clear surface and shouldn't interfere with the colours underneath. But this will need 2 coats. It's quite a warm and quite a dry day, so I can probably go into the second coat straight away.